Story number one. I worked the night shift as a security guard at Stonehill Cemetery for about 3 years. It was an old place on the edge of town, surrounded by thick oak trees and iron gates that always seemed to creak, even when there was no wind. Most nights were quiet, just me, a flashlight, and the muffled sounds of distant traffic. I didn't mind the solitude, but there was one night I'll never forget. The cemetery had a set of underground tunnels, storage from decades ago when the place was run by the old church nearby. They used to store maintenance equipment and sometimes even preserve bodies before burial in winter. The newer staff avoided them, said the tunnels were unsafe and full of mold. But the company's rulebook was clear. If I ever found a door or gate left open, I had to investigate and secure it before logging my report. It was around 2:30 a.m. that night. The air was cold enough to make my breath visible. I was finishing my third round when I noticed something unusual near the slope behind the mausoleum. One of the old metal gates leading into the tunnels was slightly ajar. The padlock was hanging loose, broken at the latch. I bent to inspect it, expecting rust, but it looked snapped clean, as if forced. Then I heard voices. They were faint, muffled but unmistakable, a mix of low murmuring and a woman's soft laugh. At first I thought maybe some teenagers had snuck in. It happened sometimes, but the sound didn't quite match a normal conversation. It was too rhythmic, like whispers echoing through a pipe, each syllable drawn out longer than it should have been. I shone my flashlight through the gate. The tunnel stretched ahead, old concrete walls slick with moisture. The beam caught dust and cobwebs, and the air smelled of rust and wet soil. I didn't know where the light switch was. The old wiring hadn't worked in years, so I had to go in with just the flashlight. The moment I stepped in, the air felt heavier. The sound of my boots echoed against the narrow walls, overlapping with faint dripping somewhere deeper inside. Every few steps, I thought I heard movement ahead, just a shuffle or a foot scuffing against gravel, but it would stop when I paused. The voices had gone quiet now, but the tunnel wasn't silent. I could hear a low humming, almost electrical, though there was no power down there. My flashlight flickered once, just long enough for my chest to tighten, then steadied again. I passed a few rusted storage shelves, old shovels, buckets, some wooden crates. A rat darted across the beam, and I exhaled slowly, trying to calm myself. The deeper I went, the colder it got. My breath started forming small clouds again, and I could smell something faintly sweet and metallic, like blood mixed with damp earth. I told myself it was just the old air, trapped for years. The tunnel split ahead into two paths. Both looked identical, but from the left one came a faint tapping sound. 3 taps, then a pause, then 2 more. I tried calling out just to check if anyone was there, but my voice came out weaker than I intended and just bounced back at me, distorted. No response. I followed the tapping. The flashlight beam wavered over old bricks and a collapsed section of pipe. The tapping grew louder, sharper, like metal striking concrete from inside the wall. I was maybe 10 feet away when it stopped. The silence that followed felt wrong, not empty, more like something was waiting. That's when I heard the breathing. It wasn't mine. It was shallow and raspy, coming from somewhere just beyond the beam's reach. I slowly swung the light around, but the tunnel looked empty. Still, the sound didn't stop. It moved, circling me, echoing from different angles, as if something was pacing just out of sight. I backed away toward the junction, trying to convince myself it was acoustics, or an animal trapped in the vents. The tunnel's old structure did weird things with sound. That's what I told myself. Then the light flickered again, and for half a second I saw something in the dark. A shape. It looked like a person standing sideways, pressed against the tunnel wall, unmoving. But when the beam steadied, it was gone. Just the damp wall and a peeling patch of moss. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it echoed. I decided that was enough. I'd mark the area in my report, call maintenance in the morning, and lock it for now. I turned back toward the entrance. Except when I reached it, the gate was closed. Not fully, but halfway, just enough that the chains clanked against the frame. I was sure I'd left it wide open. I shone the light through and saw the lock swinging from the latch. My first instinct was to run, but something made me stop. There was movement in the beam again. The shape was at the far end, near the bend I'd just come from. This time it was clearer, pale, human-like, but its posture was wrong. Its limbs seemed too long, one shoulder higher than the other. It didn't walk. It seemed to slide forward like it was being pulled by something behind it. I ran. I didn't look back. I just kept the flashlight pointed ahead and sprinted until the cold night air hit my face. I slammed the gate shut, looped the chain around twice, and used my own padlock. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely close it. I called the night supervisor, reported an intruder sighting, and asked for backup. He said he'd send someone in the morning, told me not to leave the main office till dawn. When I got back to the office, I realized I'd lost my radio somewhere in the tunnel. I didn't go back for it. I just sat there till sunrise, the flashlight in my lap, staring out the window toward that part of the cemetery. In the daylight, it didn't seem that bad. The tunnel looked normal again, just old and dusty. The maintenance team found no one inside. But they did find something strange. On the wall near where I'd stopped, they said there were scratch marks, deep ones, long and uneven, as if someone had clawed through the concrete. They joked about animals or vandals. But one of the workers said something that made my stomach turn. He said the scratches formed a handprint, not pressed into dust, but carved into the stone. They sealed that tunnel a week later, welded the gate shut, and filled part of it with concrete. Officially, it was unsafe structure deterioration. I still work at the cemetery, though I transferred to the day shift soon after. The nights started feeling different after that. Too quiet, too heavy. Sometimes when I walk past the old mausoleum, I swear I can feel a faint vibration under my boots, like something tapping from far below. I tell myself it's just water pipes or air shifting under the concrete, but every now and then, when the wind is still, I think I hear that same rhythmic sound. 3 taps, then 2, coming faintly from underground. I never went near that tunnel again. And the worst part? I sometimes dream of that gate. It's always open, just a few inches. Enough for something to be watching from the dark. Story number 2. I used to work as an overnight dispatcher for the city police department. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough, and I liked the quiet. Most nights were routine: noise complaints, DUIs, domestic disturbances. You start to recognize the same names and addresses. There's a rhythm to it, and after a while it becomes almost mechanical. It was around 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday when the call came through. A woman's voice, shaky but trying to stay composed. She said her husband had gone missing a few hours earlier. He'd been struggling with depression, and sometimes when it got bad, he went to an old cemetery on the outskirts of town, Ash Grove Cemetery. She said it calmed him down. I knew Ash Grove. Everyone in dispatch did. It dated back to the 1800s, overgrown, uneven ground, moss-eaten gravestones, and a big stone mausoleum that locals swore was haunted. Every so often, teenagers would sneak in at night, daring each other to take pictures inside. We'd always chalk it up to bored kids. I dispatched 2 officers, Parker and Diaz, to check it out. About 20 minutes later, Parker radioed in. He said they'd found the husband's car parked near the gate. The door to the mausoleum was slightly open. I remember feeling a strange chill when he said that. That place had always given me the creeps, even from a distance. They went inside. I could hear their footsteps echoing faintly through the open channel, their radios picking up the sound as they moved deeper in. Parker described it as a narrow passage that led underground. Stone walls, iron pipes, and air so stale it made it hard to breathe. Then his voice suddenly tightened. He said they'd seen something. It wasn't long before I heard the words I still can't forget. They'd found the man, hanging from a pipe, head tilted at an odd angle. The thing that stuck with me most was how Parker said his feet were still touching the floor. It didn't make sense to me at first. How can someone hang themselves with their feet still down? But I didn't ask questions. I just logged the call, noted the time, and waited for them to finish the scene report. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. That night, when my shift ended around 6 a.m., I couldn't shake the unease. I've handled suicides before, but something about this one stuck differently. It was quiet, heavy, the kind of case that lingers in the corners of your mind. When I came back from my next shift, Parker stopped by dispatch before heading home. He looked off, said he hadn't been able to sleep, kept hearing a weird metallic clanging sound in his house, like someone tapping a pipe. He laughed it off, but it didn't sound like a joke. Later that same night, I started getting phantom feedback through my headset. Faint noises when no one was transmitting. It started as static, then slow, dragging sounds like someone's boots scraping against stone. Once I thought I heard a faint voice whisper something, just a breathy syllable, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. Around 3 a.m., the line flickered and went dead for a few seconds. When it came back, a voice was already speaking, soft, distant, almost underwater. It wasn't any of our units. The system automatically records every call, and I went back to check it later. The voice was faint, but it said one clear word. Still. I didn't report it. Technical glitches happen all the time in dispatch. Headset interference, overlapping channels, cross signals. That's what I told myself. A few nights later, Parker didn't show up for roll call. They found him sitting in his truck outside his apartment complex. Engine off, door open, just staring ahead. He wasn't hurt, but he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He told Diaz he kept dreaming about the mausoleum, about hearing someone whisper from the pipes. Said every time he turned on a faucet or shower, he'd hear someone gasping just beneath the flow. He took medical leave after that. Things at the station got weird too. Dispatch lines would ring once and then stop. When we played back recordings, you could hear faint dripping sounds and what almost sounded like breathing. One night, I got a silent 911 call that lasted 34 seconds. I could hear someone walking on gravel, heavy and slow, before it abruptly cut to static. When I traced the signal, it came from inside Ash Grove Cemetery, specifically near the mausoleum. I thought it might have been a prank, maybe a kid using a voice modulator. But something about it didn't feel staged. The pacing of the footsteps, the deliberate slowness. It was too natural, too human. I convinced myself to stop thinking about it. But then small things began happening at home. My bathroom pipes started making knocking sounds at night. Not the random clicking old plumbing makes. This was steady, rhythmic, like someone gently tapping from inside the pipes. Once when I was brushing my teeth, I heard it again. 3 soft knocks. I turned off the water, and it stopped. I stood there for a moment, trying to convince myself it was just air pressure or water hammer. Then it happened again. But this time, I could have sworn I heard a muffled exhale afterward, like someone sighing through the drain. A week later, the department sent another pair of officers to recheck Ash Grove. Apparently, the wife had called again, saying her husband's phone, which was in police custody as evidence, had sent her a text. Just one word. Still. The forensic team swore the phone hadn't been used. It had been locked away, no outgoing calls or messages. The timestamp, though, was real. That night, I started hearing faint noises over the dispatch speakers again, scraping, like someone dragging metal. I checked all the lines, but everything was secure. Out of instinct, I played back the audio of the initial discovery, the one from the night they found the man. When the officer's flashlights caught him hanging there, the recording captured a few seconds of silence before Parker spoke. But when I played it back this time, there was something new underneath his voice, a whisper. So faint I almost missed it. Slowed down, it sounded like someone saying, "I'm still here." After that, I started muting my headset whenever the lines went quiet. It became an instinct, like avoiding eye contact with something you don't want to see. 2 months later, the mausoleum was sealed by city order. No official reason was given, but rumors spread, workers hearing voices through the walls, seeing wet footprints leading to the locked door. Sometimes when the night shift is slow and the static hums in the dispatch room, I still think about that call, about how calm the woman's voice was when she said her husband liked to go there, just to be alone, about how Parker said his feet were touching the floor, like he was standing. Last week, during another dead hour between calls, I was updating system logs when a new call flashed on the screen. It showed no number, just blank. It auto-answered on its own. For a few seconds, there was nothing but soft static. Then faintly, I heard that dragging sound again, stone against stone, and then a voice, low, strained, like someone speaking through water. It said, "Dispatch?" I froze. The line cut off before I could respond. The system didn't record it. It wasn't logged anywhere. But when I looked down, the caller ID field had populated with something new. Just one word, Ashgrove. I haven't told anyone about it. I still work nights. Sometimes when it's quiet, I can hear that low knocking from the pipes above the dispatch desk. Always 3 knocks. Always when I'm alone. I tell myself it's just the building settling. Just old plumbing. But sometimes, just sometimes, I can't shake the feeling that someone's still trying to call in. Story number 3. I used to work the late shift as IT support for the college, mostly fixing projectors, updating software, and replacing cables in empty classrooms. The night shifts were quiet, too quiet sometimes, but I didn't mind. It gave me time to work without distractions. The few students in evening classes were usually tucked away in the main building. The side wings where I did most of my work stayed pitch dark and silent. That night, I got a ticket to install some software on the instructor PC in a classroom I'd never been to before. Room C12, down in the old health sciences wing. I didn't even know that part of the building was still in use. The hallways there smelled faintly of disinfectant, like a hospital that had been scrubbed but never properly aired out. It was around 10 p.m. when I finally got around to it. I grabbed my toolkit, scanned my badge at the door, and stepped inside. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I rarely did for quick jobs. The glow from the hallway was enough to see where I was going. I'd walked halfway across the room toward the instructor's desk when something made me stop dead in my tracks. Every hair on my body stood up at once. That deep primal feeling that someone, no, many someones, were watching me. The air felt thicker, almost like I'd stepped into a space that was already occupied. As my eyes adjusted to the dim blue of the monitor light, I finally saw them. Lining the walls all around the classroom were hospital beds, real ones, metal framed, with thin mattresses, rails, and the kind of adjustable headrests I'd seen in old medical wards. And in every single bed sat a person, upright, motionless. They were all looking right at me. Their faces were pale, almost gray, and their eyes were wide open, reflecting the faint computer light. No one moved. No one blinked. For a good 5 seconds, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I thought I'd walked into a training mannequin lab, maybe. But no, these people were too real. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a chair. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. I fumbled for the wall switch and slammed it up. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, humming softly. And the room was empty. No beds, no people. Just a regular classroom, rows of desks, a whiteboard, and a computer at the front. I stood there for a minute, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just my brain filling in shapes in the dark. Those old rooms sometimes had strange layouts, storage stuff pushed against walls. That had to be it. Still, something about the air in that room felt wrong. Heavy, stale, like a place that hadn't seen daylight in a long time. I went to the instructor's PC and started the install. My hands were trembling slightly, but the routine helped calm me down. The fan whirred softly. The monitor reflected a faint outline of my own face, pale, tired, and behind me, the empty classroom. Except it wasn't empty. The reflection showed faint outlines again, dark figures in the corners, where the light didn't reach. Blurred, but distinct enough to tell they were human shapes. I turned around. Nothing. I looked back at the screen. They were closer now. I spun around again, knocking my toolkit off the desk. The clatter echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. I didn't even bother picking it up. I unplugged the flash drive, shut down the monitor, and got the hell out. The hallway felt safer, but not by much. The air was still thick with that faint antiseptic smell. I checked the door. The plaque read C12 Health Tech Simulation Room. Maybe those had been mannequins after all. Maybe my brain had just freaked out in the dark. I told myself that all the way back to the help desk. A week later, I got another call. Same building, different room. The system had flagged a projector error in C10, just 2 doors down from C12. I didn't want to go, but I couldn't justify skipping it either. This time I turned on the lights the second I entered. The classroom looked normal. Rows of tables, a whiteboard, ceiling fans spinning lazily. I started working on the projector cable when I heard it. A faint beep, not the sound of a projector, a steady, rhythmic tone, like a heart monitor. I froze. It was coming from the wall that connected to C12. The sound continued. Beep, 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 perfectly timed, like something alive was on the other side. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I swear I could feel something pressing against the other side of that wall, like a presence leaning in, listening. I packed up and left without testing the projector. That night, when I clocked out and walked to my car, I passed the row of windows that faced the health sciences wing. The lights were off inside, but in one of the upper windows, C12's window, a faint light flickered. For a second, I thought I saw movement. Dozens of faces pressed against the glass, pale and motionless, watching. I blinked and they were gone. A few weeks passed. I got a call from the same wing. When I went down there, the corridor lights were dimmer than usual, flickering at intervals. I reached the door and found it slightly ajar. My badge beeped red when I tried to scan in, which was odd. Maintenance doors weren't supposed to lock automatically. I pushed it open, and the lights came on by themselves. The room looked perfectly normal again. Desks, chairs, computer. But this time the air was freezing cold. I could see my breath in front of me. I just needed to get the install done and leave. I kept my eyes on the monitor, refusing to look around. Halfway through, I heard something drag across the floor behind me. Then came the breathing. Shallow. Dozens of faint breaths all around me. I turned slowly, against every instinct. The desks were gone. The room had changed again. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and there they were. Those hospital beds. All of them occupied. All the figures sitting up, their heads tilted just slightly, their eyes locked on me. No movement, no sound except the low hum of the lights and that faint, synchronized breathing. I stepped back, and one of them, the nearest one, smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just this slow, twitching curl of the lips, like the memory of a smile forced through stiff muscles. I bolted. I don't remember getting to the hallway, or the stairwell, or the parking lot. Just the pounding in my chest and the sense that something was following, right up until I got in my car and locked the doors. After that night, I refused to go back to that building. Every so often, though, when I'm working late somewhere else on campus and the lights flicker, I catch a faint reflection in the dark glass of a monitor. Pale faces, half seen, waiting. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks after too many late nights. But deep down, I know that somewhere in that building, room C12 is still waiting. Lights off, air cold, and every bed occupied. Story number 4. I work at a small bagel shop in town. It's one of those cozy, family-run places that smells like yeast, coffee, and burnt crumbs. My shift usually starts before sunrise when the streets are still quiet, and the sky is that murky blue that makes you feel like you're the only person awake in the world. We have one of those automatic bagel slicers, the kind with the spinning blade that's supposed to make perfect, even cuts. It's an old machine, loud and temperamental, but it does the job. You just drop a bagel in, pull down the handle, and it slices clean through. That machine is where all of this started. It was about 3 months ago. I was alone on the early shift. My coworker, Pete, had called in sick, so it was just me prepping everything before the morning rush. The shop was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional creak from the old pipes. The slicer sat at the far end of the counter, its dull metal reflecting the dim yellow light from the ceiling. The first weird thing I noticed was that the slicer had already been plugged in. I never leave it plugged overnight. That's standard safety rule. But when I came in that morning, it was humming softly, like the motor was running low, even though the blade wasn't moving. I figured maybe someone from the night cleaning crew forgot to unplug it. When I got close, I noticed the blade wasn't still. It was spinning slowly, making this low metallic whine, almost like it was turning underwater. I hit the power switch and the sound stopped immediately. I thought it was weird, but I didn't think much of it then. Around 6, I started slicing bagels for the display case. Everything was fine until I picked up one sesame bagel and felt it. Warm. Not like oven warm, but like someone had just been holding it in their hand. Every other bagel was cool to the touch, but this one felt almost body temperature. I shrugged it off, slid it into the slicer, and pulled the handle down. The blade jammed halfway. The motor made a sound like a drill hitting concrete, and the whole machine jerked hard. I yanked the handle back, and when I looked down, the bagel wasn't there. It was just gone. I looked under the machine. Behind it, nothing. I even unscrewed the tray underneath, thinking it might have dropped into the gear somehow. But there was nothing there except a streak of something dark brown that looked too thick to be bread. I turned off the slicer, cleaned the counter, and tried to shake it off. That night, when I was closing up, I swore I heard the slicer running again. I'd already unplugged it, turned off the breakers, everything. Still, I could hear the faint, wet hum of the blade turning. When I went near it, the noise stopped. I touched the machine, and it was warm, just like that bagel had been. After that, strange things started happening regularly. Sometimes when the shop was empty, the slicer would click on by itself for a few seconds, spin slowly, then stop. My manager thought it was an electrical short, but we had it inspected twice. The technician said there was nothing wrong with it. Still, every few days it would turn itself on. The smell was another thing. It started as a faint burnt odor, like over-toasted bread, but then it grew sharper. It began smelling like scorched hair and metal. The weirdest part was that it only happened when I was near the slicer. Customers never noticed it. My co-workers didn't either. I even asked one of them once to check if the machine smelled funny, and they just said it smelled like normal bagels. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Sleep deprivation, early shifts, caffeine headaches. I told myself it was all in my head. But one morning something happened that I still can't explain. I was slicing a batch of onion bagels, half asleep, when I felt something grab my wrist. Hard. It was quick. Just a second. But it felt like a hand, cold and rough. I jumped back, dropped the bagel, and looked under the machine again. Nothing. My wrist had this faint red mark around it, like pressure lines. I told myself it could have been the suction from the slicer's air vent, but I'd used that machine for years. It had never done that before. That night, I dreamt about the machine. In the dream, I was standing in the dark shop, and the slicer was running on its own. Each time it finished a slice, something red splattered from inside. Not blood exactly, but thick, dark liquid that spread across the counter. I couldn't move. The handle started rising and falling by itself, like someone invisible was using it. When I woke up, my hand was still clenched around an imaginary handle, fingers stiff and sore. The next night, the blade started spinning by itself again, faster this time. I could see small flakes, crumbs I hoped, flying off from the slit. The machine made this low grinding noise, almost like a growl. The lights flickered, and when they came back, the slicer had stopped. There was something wedged in the blade. It wasn't a bagel. It looked like a piece of cloth, dirty, frayed, stained with something dark. I used tongs to pull it out. It was a small bit of checkered shirt fabric, the same kind our old baker Martin used to wear before he disappeared last year. Everyone said he'd just quit and moved away without telling anyone. I never questioned it. After that, I stopped using the slicer. I just cut the bagels by hand. But every time I walked past the counter, the reflection on the machine side looked off. The last time I saw it, I was cleaning the counter before closing. I caught my reflection in the slicer again, but it wasn't quite me. The eyes were wrong, too sunken, too focused. The reflection's mouth moved like it was saying something I couldn't hear. I unplugged the machine, threw the rag over it, and walked out without finishing the cleaning. That was 2 weeks ago. The shop owner says the slicer finally broke down completely. He's ordering a new one. But every time I pass by that counter, I still hear the faint hum, like a blade turning somewhere just out of sight. Some people say it's all electrical faults and paranoia. The machine malfunctioning, my sleep-deprived brain connecting dots that don't exist. Maybe they're right. Machines don't have hunger or memory. But every time I close my eyes, I feel that cold grip on my wrist again, and I can't shake the feeling that something inside that slicer is still waiting for someone to feed it one more bagel. Or maybe something else entirely. Story number 5. I've worked in the emergency department for over 8 years now. Night shifts have never bothered me much. The quiet hum of the vending machines, the soft flicker of fluorescent lights, and the occasional moans from the trauma bay. You learn to live with the constant mix of adrenaline and fatigue. But there's one night I can't forget. Not because of what I saw, but because I still don't know if it really happened, or if it's something my mind made up to fill in the blanks. It was a Tuesday around 3:10 in the morning. The ER was dead quiet. No trauma calls, no ambulance sirens. Just that eerie calm that feels wrong inside a hospital meant for emergencies. I was sitting at the front desk, finishing some paperwork, when the automatic glass doors opened on their own. That whoosh sound, the soft hiss of air and the click of the sliding glass. It was clear and distinct. I looked up, expecting to see a patient walk in, or maybe an EMT wheeling someone in. But nobody came. The door just stayed open for a few seconds before slowly closing again. At first, I thought it might be the motion sensor acting up. We had that issue a few months back when a moth kept triggering it, but something about it felt off this time. I don't know why, but I got up to check anyway. The vestibule between the outer and inner doors was empty. The lights were dim, flickering slightly the way they sometimes do when it's cold out. I pushed the outer doors open and stepped into the entrance area, the concrete still wet from an earlier drizzle. There were no cars, no ambulances, no people. Just the hum of the streetlights and that faint, faraway sound of a train. I was about to head back inside when I noticed it. The floor beneath the doors had a dark, shiny patch spreading out toward the inner glass panels. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. Then my stomach dropped. It was blood. Not a few drops, not a nosebleed kind of situation, but a massive pool of it. Thick, dark red, already beginning to clot around the edges. The kind of volume you only see in trauma cases. There were no footprints, no drag marks, no wheel tracks. Just blood. Fresh, and a lot of it. I froze there for what felt like minutes, my heart hammering in my ears. Then training kicked in. I hit the wall intercom and called security, told them to check the CCTV footage. They showed up within minutes, and I went back inside to meet them. When they reviewed the camera feed, though, that's where things got strange. The footage showed the automatic doors opening exactly when I heard them, but no one entered. No one even approached from outside. The camera that covered the parking lot showed nothing but still pavement and rain. And when the guards and I went back out to the vestibule together, the blood was gone. Completely gone. The tiles were spotless. No wetness, no smears, no cleaning residue. It was like it had never been there at all. I remember the security guys giving me this cautious look, like they didn't want to say what they were thinking. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I'd fallen asleep for a moment. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. But I know what I saw. I tried to shake it off. The rest of the shift went by slowly, but nothing else weird happened until the following week. Same shift, different night. Around 2:40 a.m., the automatic doors opened again. This time I didn't move right away. I just stared at the vestibule, waiting. After a few seconds, the doors closed. Nothing else. But maybe 10 minutes later, the ER pager went off. The trauma bay needed prep for a hit-and-run victim. They said the ambulance was 10 minutes out. When the patient finally arrived, I froze again. The guy was barely alive. He had lost a lot of blood, almost exactly the kind of volume I'd seen in that mysterious pool. He didn't make it. After the team called time of death, I stepped outside again. For some reason, I just felt drawn to the vestibule. The air there was colder than usual, like someone had turned on the AC just for that space. And there, faint but real, was that smell of iron. Metallic, sharp, and unmistakable. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Every time the doors opened by themselves, someone critical would arrive shortly after. Sometimes minutes, sometimes an hour later. Once it was a woman who had coded in her car right outside. Another time, a fire victim who was already gone before the ambulance doors opened. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence. Hospitals have their strange timings. The universe plays cruel jokes sometimes. But it started feeling predictable, like the doors were giving a warning, a grim announcement that something fatal was on the way. Then one night, the pattern broke. The doors opened again, just past 3 a.m. I got up, expecting the usual, maybe an ambulance pulling in or someone walking through. But this time it stayed open longer than usual. The air from outside was cold, unnaturally so, like winter air in the middle of spring. When I looked down, the blood was back. Same dark pool, same spreading pattern. But this time, there were faint footprints, bare ones, small, maybe a child's. They led from the puddle toward the glass and stopped right at the threshold. I don't know why, but I followed them out, heart pounding. The parking lot was empty, but I heard something faint, a soft dripping sound from the far corner, near the dumpster area. It was steady, like water leaking. I walked toward it, every step slower than the last. The smell hit me first, that heavy copper scent of blood. When I turned the corner, the sound stopped. There was nothing there, just a single small handprint on the concrete wall, smudged in red. I backed away and went inside. I didn't tell anyone about that part. Not the blood, not the handprint. A few nights later, one of the nurses who worked the early morning shift came in pale and shaking. She said when she parked her car, she saw a kid standing by the ER entrance, barefoot, wearing a hospital gown. She blinked and he was gone. That was the same night the doors opened at 3:03 a.m. again. One night, I came back from the restroom and found a smear of blood across the front desk counter. A single streak, like someone had dragged their hand there. The security footage showed nothing. It's been a few months now and I still work the night shift. The doors still open on their own sometimes, though not always at 3 a.m. anymore. Last night they opened at 1:47. No one came in. But when I went to check the vestibule, there was a faint red smear across the floor tiles again, shaped almost like a footprint. It wasn't there when I blinked. The cleaning crew said it must have been rust. Maybe they're right. Maybe it's all just tricks of light and fatigue. But I can't help noticing, every time the doors open on their own, the air feels heavier, like someone's still waiting to be let in. Story number 6. I work as a maintenance technician at the airport. I had never done the night shifts, but this one time, we were short-staffed. I've seen my fair share of odd things. Flickering lights, misplaced luggage, even a bird trapped inside a terminal once. But what happened that night at Gate 12 still makes my stomach twist whenever I walk that corridor. It was around 1 a.m. The airport was half asleep. Just a few cleaners mopping the floors and an occasional passenger wandering through the terminal, their footsteps echoing too loudly in the stillness. My job was routine. Check the lights, inspect the conveyor belts, ensure all the renovation zones were sealed off properly. Gate 12 had been shut for a month because of ongoing repairs. The construction team had left a few temporary barriers and warning signs. The lights in that section were dim, and a thin film of dust had settled everywhere. I remember the faint hum of the overhead lights and the soft whine of the distant air conditioning. I was halfway through my inspection when I heard it, the mechanical groan of a conveyor belt starting up. It was loud, sudden, and wrong. That section's power had been cut weeks ago. The noise echoed through the hollow terminal, and for a second I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Then it came again, the belt rattling, jerking, coming to life with that industrial clatter I'd heard 1,000 times before during luggage hours. Except this time, there was no one around. I walked toward it, my flashlight beam shaking a little. The conveyor belt near Gate 12 was moving, the black rubber surface slowly turning, squeaking under its own weight. I checked the control panel. It was dark, no power light. My brain couldn't make sense of it. That's when I noticed the bag. It was transparent but cloudy, covered in grime and dust. It looked like one of those old vinyl bags people used decades ago. Torn threads hung from its edges, and something pale gleamed inside under my flashlight. It moved slightly as the belt dragged it along. The smell hit me next. It wasn't the usual musty odor of old terminals. It was sharp and sour, the kind of stench that burns your throat and makes your eyes water, like something had been dead a while. I gagged, pulling my sleeve over my nose. I thought maybe it was a dead animal, or maybe food gone bad. But when I bent closer and the beam caught the inside of the bag, my skin crawled. There were bones inside, small ones, too many to be from a single animal. They clinked faintly when the belt jolted. I could see the curve of a rib, the shape of fingers maybe. I'm not sure. I dropped the flashlight for a second, my hands shaking so badly that the light rolled across the floor and threw wild shadows around the room. I told myself it had to be fake. Maybe a prop from the construction crew or something left over from a training exercise. But the smell, it was too real. When I straightened up, I felt it. That prickling awareness at the back of my neck. The sense that someone was standing just behind me. I froze, my breath fogging in the cold air. Slowly I turned. At the far end of the terminal, just past the last sign that read Gate 12 under renovation, there was a figure, a woman. She stood still, her head tilted slightly to one side. Her clothes looked wrong. Not like modern airport attire. More like something from another decade. A dull, faded uniform, maybe. It was hard to tell because everything about her seemed washed out. But what I could see clearly were the stains. Dark blotches smeared across her sleeves and chest. I raised my flashlight and aimed it toward her. The beam hit the wall behind her. She was gone. Just gone. The conveyor belt suddenly stopped with a heavy thunk. The silence that followed felt thicker than before. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I backed away, every instinct screaming to get out. But part of my job meant I had to at least check the power line. I forced myself to follow the wiring behind the belt. The cables had been disconnected. The entire unit was dead, exactly as it should be. That made no sense. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw her again. She was standing right at the entrance of Gate 12 this time, blocking the way out. The bag I'd dropped was in her hands. She clutched it tightly against her chest like something precious. The skin on her fingers looked pale, almost gray and too smooth, like wax. Her head was slightly bent forward, but I could see her mouth, stretched into a crooked smile. The smell got worse. It filled the air, thick and nauseating, like decay mixed with disinfectant. She lifted one hand, slow, deliberate, and pulled something out of the bag. I couldn't process what I was seeing until she threw it. A bone. It hit the floor near my foot and rolled. The sound it made, that hollow, dry rattle, still echoes in my memory. I ducked instinctively, my body trembling, my breath ragged. When I looked back up, she was gone again. The corridor was empty. But something had changed. The fluorescent light above me flickered and then dimmed, casting long shadows that stretched and moved as if breathing. The hum of electricity had gone. The only sound was a faint scraping, like nails dragging against metal, coming from somewhere inside the belt machinery. I didn't check it. I didn't even look back. I just walked, ran, out of Gate 12, straight to the security post. I didn't tell them about the woman. I just said the power system in the terminal had glitched again. The next morning, when the day team went to check, everything was normal. The belt wasn't running, the power lines were still disconnected, and there was no bag anywhere. For a few days, I tried to convince myself that maybe it was exhaustion. Night shifts mess with your head. Maybe the woman was just a shadow, and the bones were pieces of broken piping or scrap plastic. Maybe. But a week later, when I was assigned to the same wing again, I noticed something that froze me on the spot. On the conveyor belt near Gate 12, right where I'd found the bag, there was a faint, dark smear, like something had leaked and been wiped poorly. I told my supervisor I wouldn't do solo checks in that area anymore. Maybe that's all it was, a story. But sometimes, on quiet nights when I pass near Gate 12, I hear the faint click of a conveyor belt starting up. Just one cycle, just for a second. And always without fail, I smell it again. That same sharp, rotting scent. Faint but real enough to make my throat tighten. I don't look, I don't check. I've learned that some machines start for reasons you can't explain, and some passengers, maybe, never really left. Story number 7. I work on a cargo ship, one of those massive ones that haul freight trucks across the ocean. My shift runs mostly at night, when the rest of the crew sleeps, and the ship is just a faint hum in the middle of nowhere. We take turns doing fire control rounds, basically walking every deck, checking for hazards, leaks, or equipment malfunctions. It sounds boring, and it usually is. About a month ago, I was halfway through one of those rounds, down on one of the lower decks. That's where they load the long-haul trucks, packed so tightly together, you have to turn sideways to squeeze through the narrow gaps. The air is always thick with diesel, oil, and that faint metallic tang of salt water. The overhead lights flicker like tired eyes and the steel floor clanks under each step. I had my earbuds in, listening to some podcast to keep myself awake. I was halfway through checking the freezer trailers, each one running independently, humming steadily with its own little engine. I leaned over to check the temperature gauge on one of them. Everything looked fine, steady minus 21 degrees Celsius, just as it should be. Then I turned away and froze. Right behind me, close enough that I felt the shift in air, came a faint, weak voice. Just one word, muffled, like through a wall. It said something I couldn't quite make out. Just a single human syllable, soft but there. I yanked out one earbud, thinking someone was maybe down there with me. But the only sounds were the layered hums of refrigeration units, the creaks of metal expanding, and the low, distant thrum of the engines. I told myself I probably misheard something from the podcast. Maybe the echo of my boots, maybe a compressor kicking in. I laughed under my breath, though it sounded nervous even to me. Still, I glanced around anyway. The aisle stretched ahead between two rows of trailers, their metallic sides reflecting dull patches of light. I couldn't see the ends. Just that narrow metal corridor that seemed to go on forever. I went back to work. A few minutes later, I noticed one of the trailers had a thin line of frost creeping from the rubber seal around the door. Not unusual if the unit was overworking. I leaned close to check for leaks in the seal, and then, again, the voice. This time it was clearer. Still faint, still strained, but I could swear it came from inside that very trailer. A slow, dragging whisper that sounded almost like someone trying to form a word, but barely managing it. It didn't sound electronic. It didn't echo right. It sounded wet. I stepped back. My brain instantly started listing rational explanations. Maybe air moving through a vent. Maybe the shifting of frozen goods inside. Maybe condensation dripping onto metal. But none of those things should sound like a person. I bent down and pressed my ear against the metal door, even though every instinct screamed at me not to. The metal was ice cold, burning against my skin. For a second there was nothing, just that low humming. And then, faint but definite, I heard it again. A dragging sound, like fingernails, slow and deliberate, tracing the inside of the steel wall. I jerked back so hard I hit the truck next to me. My flashlight beam bounced around, cutting through the frost and steam. I tried laughing again, but my throat had gone dry. I noted the trailer number, told myself I'd log it later, and practically speed walked down to the next row. The rest of the round went uneventful enough, though I swear I felt the temperature drop the further I went. When I finished, I went up to the control room to note the freezer anomaly, but when I checked the manifest, that specific trailer had been marked as empty. It wasn't even supposed to be powered. The next night, I volunteered for a different section. I didn't want to go back down there, but routine is routine. A few days later, it was my turn again. This time, I avoided looking at that trailer. Still, as I passed it, I noticed the frost creeping further up its hinges. My breath came out visible in the air, even though the rest of the hold wasn't that cold. Halfway down the aisle, my flashlight flickered. It always happens once or twice per round, so I smacked it, trying to get it back on. The light stuttered, then completely died. The hum of machinery seemed louder now. The darkness felt close. I could still see faint outlines, the square shapes of trucks, the slivers of reflected light, but everything had that dense, sound-swallowing quality. And then came that noise again. Not the voice this time. A low, rhythmic thumping, slow, dull, from behind me. I turned around, heart hammering, and waited for my eyes to adjust. The sound stopped. Then I heard it again, this time from a trailer a few rows over. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't machinery. It was too irregular for that. It sounded like something hitting the inside of the trailer. Thump, thump, pause, then a dragging sound again. I backed up slowly, trying not to make noise. My foot brushed against something metallic. It was a loose tie-down chain. When it clattered against the floor, all the sound stopped. I waited, and then, I swear, every refrigeration unit around me hiccuped, all at once. Like the power surged for just a split second, the hum went low, then high again, and for a moment, the air filled with a faint smell of something sour. like old brine in decay. My flashlight blinked back to life just then, and that's when I saw it. Every frost-covered surface around me had fogged over. The condensation had formed patterns, not random streaks or drips. They were shaped almost like prints, like some sort of symbols or sigils against the inside of the metal. I didn't wait around. I made it back to the stairs, climbed until my legs hurt, and didn't stop until I was on deck breathing in open air. I didn't tell anyone that night. What could I even say? That one of the empty trailers was making noises? That I heard voices and saw frost patterns? I'd sound like I'd gone stir crazy. We're scheduled to unload at port soon, and I've been thinking about whether to tell someone to check that container first. But every time I walk past it, that same feeling comes back. The heavy air, the cold creeping under my skin, like something behind that steel door is listening. Sometimes I wonder if maybe something got loaded into that trailer by mistake. Some poor stowaway who froze before they could get out. Or maybe it's just metal contracting, or air currents bouncing around. That's the thing about being at sea. You start hearing things that aren't there. But a few nights ago, when the generators briefly cut out during a storm, the whole ship went silent for about 5 seconds. No hum, no vibration, just stillness. In that silence, I swear, I heard a faint sound rising from below deck. A slow, dragging voice calling something. Too weak to make out, but somehow knowing exactly which direction to reach. And the worst part? I was off duty. No one else was down there.